Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addicted makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multichromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter. And today we're going to be ranking most of my pink palettes in an honor to the Barbie movie that's coming out and all this Barbiecore pink everything that is happening right now. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me. We're getting into it right now. And let's see, if you were enjoying this eye look, it's coming from the Jolie Beauty Sirens palette. I'm currently testing this out. Yes, I am wearing pressed glitters. I am attempting to use a new like peel off glue for the pressed glitters. So if you want to see kind of how that's working out, definitely make sure you check out that video. Alright, and of course, the palette that kind of inspired me to do this video was this one, because the Barbie movie just came out. We've got this beautiful Glam Light Barbie palette, but actually this palette only has like 4 pink shades in it. So what I wanted to do was kind of look through my collection, the palettes that had bright pink shades, really intense pink shades, a bunch of different pinks. I wanted to pull those to kind of do a little ranking here for you. But these are not all of my pink palettes because I tried to not include too many that were like more mauve-y shade palettes. So hopefully that's helpful. So I have about 22 palettes here to show you guys, and I'm going to run through them a little bit quick, give you guys kind of my impression or my feelings on the palette and why I put them where I put them. And hopefully this is fun for you guys and you can rank some of your own Barbie pink palettes that you have at home. So coming in dead last is the Jacqueline and I guess Morphe Strawberry Feels palette, and it looks like this. And the reason why I picked it out is because with a name like Strawberry Feels and this kind of all pink packaging, you really feel like this should be an all pink palette, and you basically have like this pink shade here, which on camera is pulling very like beige. This is definitely red. You've got 2 more reds here, a bunch of like orangey brown shades, a coral, a white, and a shimmer. The palette itself is fine, like it functions okay, but it's very like one-dimensional. You can basically make one look out of this palette. And so for me, this sank down pretty low because the formula is just fine and it's not very versatile despite having 10 shades in it. Not versatile at all. Next, coming in at 21 is the Coca-Cola and Morphe Cherry Coke collection, and it looks like this. Again, this is another palette that has that same kind of like Morphe quality, which is fine. I do really like these metallic pinky kind of shades in here, and then you do have some like softer shades that I think work nice to blend out. I like that you go from very light to very deep, which is classic for Morphe palettes. I like the tin packaging, the collab like IP that they used, I like a lot as well. But it's saying to the lower end of things, 1, because a lot of the shades are not actually pink, and 2, because it's Morphe and Morphe quality. All right. Coming in at number 20 is the Glam Light Berrylicious palette with Strawberry Shortcake, and I was actually surprised that this one came so low, but the reason why it's coming so low is because it's so much of the same. Like the pinky shades in here, the red shades in here, there's a lot of shades that look very similar, so there's not enough variation in here to make like different looking looks. That's what drives me crazy about this palette. I do think this shade is super pretty. I haven't actually used that shade on my lids yet, and I definitely should because it's so sparkly, but the rest of the palette just doesn't do it for me the way the other Glam Light palettes do it for me, so it fell pretty low. It came in lower than Urban Decay. Let's talk about that. So this is the Urban Decay Naked Cherry, and I had to include this one, of course, because it was like the OG kind of like pinky berry type palette that came out, what, 2017? 2018? 2017, something like that. I don't know, it's been out for a minute, right? And I do like the palette, but the Urban Decay metallics are just fine. So it definitely went lower because of that. I do love the packaging though, and I like the little like cherries that are on here. I liked the cherry scented setting spray they put out with this too, if you guys remember that. Next up is the Suvo Beauty Rosé Period palette, and I put this one a little bit higher because I think the metallics in here are a little bit more dimensional than in the Urban Decay, the Glamlight, or the Morphe palettes that we just talked about. And this one definitely has some like more mauvier purpley shades, but I still, like, every time I come in here I use like this shade and I end up making basically a pink look, so it still felt right to put it in because it gives me, like, in my brain I think of this as a pink palette even though it's not like really all pink. So hopefully my camera is not jostled too much, my battery died. So the next palette, which is 17 I think, is the ColourPop Ooh La La palette. Definitely a pink palette. I have to hold it at a bit of an angle though because this shade is completely crumbled and loves to come flying out. It's the Super Shock shade from the palette. I do really like this kind of intense pink here, however it feels dry. Like every time I use it, it feels kind of patchy and dry, so I have to give it a little extra love before I can get it to blend out the way I want it to. And I feel like this palette is missing a little bit of depth because neither of these shades is terribly dark. So I think if it had a little bit more variation, I would probably put it up a little bit higher. Next is the Alien Now Unearthly Cosmetics. What is this? The Serendipity palette? No, the Strawberry Milkshake palette. I always want to call it Strawberry Shortcake, and that's not this palette. But I think Serendipity is the person who did the art for it. So it looks like this. And again, it's a palette that in my mind feels very pink, but in person is actually only like a couple of pinks, right? And I think it's kind of hard to do a red, pink, green palette color story well. I do like this formulation a little bit more than the Glamlight, and I feel like that because it's less shades, it's less redundant than the Glamlight, which is why it came up a little bit higher. The only shade I really don't care for is that one, because what am I going to do with like a almost green tone beige? Like, it just unnecessary. Alright, next up is the Millennial Pinks palette from Melt, and this one I got on like super sale or clearance, I can't remember which, but all but these last three shades are pinks, right? So this one definitely hits the criteria for me. I like the shades in here. I think this shade is actually really nice. It sort of has like a duochromy pink flip to it, and I really like the depth that this kind of cranberry pink shade has. What I don't love about this is that I feel like I struggle to blend these shades in with the grays. So the color story itself, while it's innovative, maybe it's innovative and unique for a reason because not a lot of people know what to do with it. So it falls a little bit towards the center of my ranking because although I love the packaging, I love the vibe of it, and I love the individual colors, I have a hard time putting them together. Next is the Car Beauty. This is the Blur the Lines palette, and it looks like this. Now, this one, again, it gives me, in my mind, I think of it as like a super pinky palette, but it may not necessarily be super pinky, but like this super intense pink shade here, you've got this pink shade here, you've got some softer shades over here, and then some really nice metallics that pull very pink. All these brown mattes, I feel like we didn't need all of those, but whatever. And then I do like that there's a lot of rich depth here all the way out to a black, so that you can really go the full spectrum from light to dark. Cara Beauty has some surprisingly good palettes. If you can find them at TJ Maxx or Marshalls and there's a color story you like, I would check it out. Alright, next is the Revolution Nude on Nude palette, and this is one of the last palettes that they made that was like duping a Pat McGrath palette. It's supposed to dupe out her Mothership palettes, and I like this one because I think it just has this really pretty soft kind of vibe to it, and this pink here is so almost iridescent in its quality. I really like that. I think it's a special palette. I don't have the coordinating Pat McGrath palettes for these, with the exception of the Mothership one. What is that? Sublime? Subversive? Something? The one that has the blue in it, the really bright metallic blue. That's the one I have. Other than that, I don't have any Pat McGrath palettes, so I don't know how they compare, like, quality wise, but I do think this one is very pretty and just nice soft pinks. Alright, coming in at number 12 is the Beauty Bay New Romantic. This was their Valentine's Day launch, I think 2 years ago at this point, and it looks like this. I like this palette a lot. I love almost every time I go in here, I use this like really bright poppy corally pink shade here, and I really like this kind of watermelon pinky red shade here. It's nice, but I feel like it's kind of forgettable for me in terms of my Beauty Bay palettes. I have a ton of Beauty Bay stuff, and this one just never, this one like never comes to the top of my mind as to like, yes, I need to get that one out and play with it. Next up is the Midas Cosmetics Smoky Glow palette, and this one is not even made anymore, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I do think it's very pretty. I have one of these beautiful pink to gold duochrome shades in here. You've got a really pretty iridescent blue shade in here, which I think makes everything else like pop nicely. I really like this Dofa shade, which is like a brown base with like burgundy red sparkle in it. Very, very pretty. And then you've got some really nice matte pinks in here. I like the glittery packaging. I liked Smoky Glow's channel, but I haven't seen too much from her recently, so I don't know if she's maybe taking a break from YouTube. Next is the Cotton Candy palette from the BH Sweet Shop palettes, and this is the formula that Revolution needs to use from BH, because BH's formula for these palettes was something else. These pinky shades in here are super, super pretty. I do also love kind of the unique quality of the blue toned and sort of purpley tones in here. I feel like they didn't just do the typical like bright pink. They kind of went with like different undertones, which I thought was really interesting, and I like that there's a coordinating sparkle shade for each of the mattes. Next up is the Coming to America 2 palette from Momo Beauty, and it looks like this. Again, a really beautiful kind of mauve-y pink type palette, but I had to include it because these metallic shades up here are so stinking pretty. They're so shiny and sparkly. Like, I just don't have a lot of palettes that have such a beautiful shine for their metallics, so I wanted to include that one. And then next, this is the Berries by Juvia's Place, and it's one of their 6-pan palettes, and really I had to include it because of these shades here. Like, this pink is like the super intense, like really bright, vibrant pink that I'm craving whenever I look for like pink palettes. So I wanted to include this one here. This one isn't used as often for me because it's all pretty much very dark, but I do think the colors are very nice. I just have to blend this with other things to kind of make it a little bit more usable for me personally. So I was surprised that this came in all the way at number 7, but this is the Strawberry Dreams palette from Lunar Beauty, and I really like this palette, but it definitely, when I think of it as a pink palette, I open it and then I'm like, oh yeah, there's basically like one pink in here, which is this matte down here. But I do still think it's a really pretty palette. I love the mattes that we have in here, especially this like burgundy berry type shade here is really pretty. I like this metallic a lot. You've got another one of these iridescent blue shades, which is awesome because it complements the two like matte blues that are in here. I like that you go super deep, but it's not black. So you have a little bit of like depth and variation, but it's not just pure black. So, and of course, Lunar Beauty always does like awesome packaging. They knocked it out of the park with that one, but there were 6 other palettes I liked even better. We have got 6 more palettes to talk through, and coming in at number 6 is the Sweet Pinks by Juvia's Place, which is another one of their 6 pans, and again, just lots of like zesty hot pinks. This is a palette that I always turn to if I need to add like a little bit of hot pink and the palette that I'm working with doesn't have it. This is one that I think to pull out and use because you have this kind of more warm corally hot pink shade, and then you've got this definitely more like cool tone fuchsia hot pink shade. You've got some gorgeous metallics that go with both of those shades, this one coordinating with that one and this one respectively. I don't typically use these 2 shades at all, but the other 4 shades in this palette definitely make it worth it. Coming in at number 5, and this also surprised me that it made it up so high, but it's Beauty Bay, and Beauty Bay rocks. This is the Ayo Coralie. This is half of the second collab that she did with Beauty Bay, and this is, what is this called? My Freaky Diary, maybe? I'm not really sure. But it comes with a duo. The other half is like green, blue, purple. But this one I really, really like. And of course, like the mattes that are in here are so like bright and poppy. This metallic pink, I don't even think I've reached into this pink just yet. But I do really like that you have this complementary gray shade here. And then the blues and the purple, I think just pull everything in quite nicely. I don't really care too much about this beige shade at all, but I do think the quality on this one is awesome, and I feel like in my mind this one is more like grab worthy than the new Romantic from Beauty Bay. I think because it's smaller, more curated, and there's some pops of other colors that I think just tie in nicely and make it a little bit more interesting than just a pink / neutral palette. Coming in at number 4. Now, once we get into the number 4 and above, I feel like these 4 palettes could have been exchanged and moved around very easily, and I wouldn't even be able to argue with you because they're all really nice, beautiful palettes. But coming in at number 4 is the Unearthly Cosmetics Sleepover palette, and it looks like this. Now, this one definitely, when I think of pink palettes, this is one of the first palettes that I think of because it's so, it like quintessentially pink, right? Like you got this whole sleepover vibe going. It's a Valentine's Day palette that they released a while ago. This pink shade, of course, is like really popping on the lids. I like that you have this deeper shade to kind of blend out with, and I do really like these 2 shades as well. I think they're very complementary. The only shades I don't care too much about are this center shade, which is just one of those like yellow golden duochrome type shades, and this kind of very chestnutty brown shade. I could have left that entirely. You'd think I would turn that off after this long, but that's the 3rd time that's happened and I'm still letting it go. I'm almost done though. So overall, I really like this palette. Those 2 shades I don't really care as much about, but everything else in here I really like. The only thing that this lacks is lightness, because even this color kind of blends into nothing on the skin. So once you've blended this shade, you don't really have anything lighter to go with. So I usually use this in tandem with another palette just to kind of give me the lightness that I need to kind of blend everything into my skin since I'm on the fair side. Coming in at number 3 is the Natasha Denona Retro palette, and this one is so pretty. This is what I wanted the Loved palette to be, and it wasn't, so I was really excited when this one came out. But the center shade in here is like this beautiful ballet slipper pink, and it has tons and tons of sparkle in it, which I just love. The other shades in here definitely are like the softer mauvier pinks, but I do still think of this palette very readily when I think about pink palettes, so I wanted to make sure that I included it for you. The only shades I really don't reach into are these kind of boring bland neutrals here on the side, but everything else in here I really like. Coming in at number 2, and this was almost number 1, but coming in at number 2 is the Huda Rose Quartz palette, which looks like this, and I feel like I gave it a -1 for the Petri dish shade because I don't like that at all. But if you can see, there's also like 3 shades that have kind of that like blue iridescent flip to them, which I think is awesome. I definitely did not need any of these like kind of boring brown shades in here, but I feel like these kind of muted, almost gray toned mauve shades plus the pinks that are in here work really, really nicely together. Overall, it's a beautiful palette. I love the finishes. I love the packaging. Like everything about this is very, very nice. And then coming in at number 1, when I think about hot pink palettes and I think about my favorite formulas, I pulled out the Dragon Fruit palette. Now, Clionadh has to be like one of my all-time favorite formulas from the brand, and in this particular palette you have a ton of like really hot pink shades, right? And their formula is just so divine. I love using it, so I ended up pulling this one and putting it at number 1. I do also like that you have some greens and this purple here to kind of balance things out a little bit, and you do have some other shades that are not necessarily pink, but number 1, some of these are multi-chrome, so I'm already like putting this in the lead. And number 2, the way that these shades all come together, like this can be used with so many other palettes to really just bring those palettes to life, bring all those mattes to life. So I love using this one in combination with other palettes. Plus this kind of like neon pink acrylic packaging on the back to the clear on the front. I love it. And with that said, that is everything for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!